I think we've realized, and we've realized it over on the other channel. And Michael, I think you probably have this in your community as well with your
Yep.
channel. Again, not trying to speak for you, but you can have disagreement and discussion without ripping each other apart. And it's healthy because, quite honestly, that is how learning happens.
Because disagreement itself isn't the threat. A functioning society requires disagreement. What destabilizes trust isn't difference of opinion, it's dehumanization, escalation, and identity warfare. And maybe the most important reminder right now is this: we cannot disagree without dehumanizing. So maybe the goal isn't to avoid conflict. Maybe the goal is to disagree without destroying the relationship. So the real discussion becomes what separates productive disagreement from destructive conflict.
Okay. So I hate to turn In the Blind into a commercial for TCF. However, if you want to know how it's done, just go over to my other channel because we do it there every day.
Well, I would also argue that the two of you do it here every time we're live. So
yeah, no, it's true. I mean, Michael and I do. It's scary how often we're thinking the same thing,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're looking at it from the same angle.
yes.
Right.
And somehow I consider Michael to be one of my best friends, despite the fact that we come from a very different background. We face very different obstacles. We're in very different places in our lives. But it's okay, because I think we've realized, and we've realized it over on the other channel. And Michael, I think you probably have this in your community as well with your channel. Again, not trying to speak for you, but you can have disagreement and discussion without ripping each other apart. And it's healthy because, quite honestly, that is how learning happens, is when you have debate, when you have exchange of ideas, when everything that you believe comes from one source. You are such an incomplete human being. You just are. You know, it's you might as well just pack it in, because you are so limiting yourself. I don't know, Michael.
I would agree. It's interesting because that was the first thing I thought of was your community, Dan, and what we do here on and off air. And this channel, and then, my community. There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of areas, a lot of examples of how we can have disagreements. We can still be civil. We can still, at the end of the day, respect one another. And I would agree, Dan. Yeah, I consider you one of my best friends because we are able to do that. We have different viewpoints on different things, certainly. Although, what I find is, and what I think a lot of people would find, because we talked about tribal stuff earlier, a lot of people will find, if they just sit down and talk, they have a lot of overlap. And I know when you tell people that, some people go, overlap with them? Oh my God, you've got to be kidding. I just want to vomit. But it's true. A lot of people, conservatives and liberals and old and young and male and female and black and white and everything in between, there's so much overlap that we have. There's more similarities than differences. It's just that we are part of us. Part of what goes on, the construct of society, is we are told to really lean into those differences. And look, differences are good in a lot of ways because it's what makes us who we are, individuality and all of that. But to use those as a way to put other people down is the problem. And to have these visceral reactions, again, this just piggybacks off of what we were just talking about. To have these visceral reactions and then get just heated, angry at somebody, you know, I think it's crazy. Now, listen, I've had some big debates with friends of mine over the years, and we've gotten, very passionate about our viewpoint. But at the end, we're still friends because we know that that's okay. Now, look, that said, I want to make sure, because somebody will inevitably point this out, Dan, or you're saying you can be friends with someone that insert absolute extreme example here, right? There are some things that are over a line that you can't get behind. Okay. But
Example?
look, man, I mean, I think I'd have a big problem with somebody that just was, going around telling me, Mike, well, that's great and all, but I don't like black people or Chinese people or white people or whatever. I don't like this group.
Okay.
I think they're all terrible, and or whatever. They say the most, just awful racial crap, and it's clearly not being done ironically or as a joke or whatever. This is like they're serious, they have something like that. Or
thank you. I just wanted to understand how you were framing it.
Yeah. I mean, there are some things I think just because I think we should have tolerance. Okay. I think we should be a much more tolerant society. But that doesn't mean you just completely abandon all standards, right? But you should understand first, before you just immediately demonize and cast somebody, I cast thee out. Before you do that, at least try to understand where they're coming from, because maybe, and I'm not just, I feel like I have to make these qualifications because over the years I've run into this problem, right? So before you completely cast out someone just because they're racist, try to find out where that came from. Maybe you could actually have a conversation with them. Maybe, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there's maybe a chance you could get through to somebody. And, somebody is like, well, I don't like, this group because when I was a kid, somebody that was a part of that group would beat me up every day for my lunch money. And so I've always just taken it out on, and maybe you could break through to them. I know this is a Pollyanna example, and this, is probably not going to happen, but maybe until you try, you don't know. I always make fun of the chemtrails people on my channel, right? The people that believe that they're spraying chemicals and manipulating the weather by spraying, aluminum oxide or whatever the hell compositions that they come up with, and that we're being poisoned, and it's all, and Bill Gates sprayed nanites on us or injected us with them, and all that stuff is all part of this big mind control machine. And look, it's lunatic stuff. It's complete tinfoil hat nonsense. And I'm willing to call it that, but I still talk to those people to try and rationalize with them and try and reason with them, because, and maybe some of them are just doing it to troll. Maybe some of them are just like, hey, I just want to get this guy's goat. I just want to get his anxiety up, or I just want to make him mad because I want to believe that, I want to just tell him I'm a flat earther or that I'm a chemtrail guy just to see their reaction. I don't know. But some of them do believe that, and I try to have conversation. Now, hey, look, sometimes people have an irrational position and there's no getting through, and there are times where you just have to cut your losses, right? But, at least give it a shot sometime.
Yeah, because you're talking about prejudices, and honestly, I think if people actually thought about why they're prejudiced against a certain group or whatnot, it usually, and you kind of alluded to this, it usually comes down to a behavioral thing.
Yeah.
Like you put it, like, Johnny, when I was 5 years old, beat me up, and, Johnny was this color, so now I don't like this color. Well, your problem isn't with that color. Your problem's with Johnny.
Right. And you've let that manifest.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's a problem that people need to work through, but I don't think, and that's the thing too, is we want to celebrate all of this diversity, right? And we want to say that diversity is good. And I'm not saying that it's not, but at the same time, we have these diverse groups that are putting up walls going, yeah, okay, we're the diverse group, but you're the enemy, so you can't be involved with us. And just like completely destroying the whole concept of diversity in their own actions. It just, it's so broken. It, you know, if you're in a minority group and you truly celebrate diversity, then you have to accept the people that are in the majority group as well, and vice versa. Everybody has to work together. Everybody has to come together, find common ground on whatever there is, or there is no such thing as diversity. And it's funny to me too that we talk about how we want to celebrate diversity, and our diversity is our strength. But to piggyback into what we've already talked about in this show, what we can't seem to allow is any diversity of thought.
At least currently,
Yeah. Which is just insane as well.
Yeah. And isn't that where the problem starts? Is diversity is good. And I think it's okay to celebrate that. It's okay to say, for me, for example, okay, the show is called In the Blind because we go into this in the blind, but also it's a play on the fact that I am, well, at least legally blind. And, it's, that's a group, right? That's a minority group, blind people or legally blind people. And I'm a part of an organization, a couple of them actually, but, including Arizona Council of the Blind, American Council of the Blind. And, we do advocacy and all that stuff. And we certainly, celebrate or say, hey, being blind is okay. We focus on mental health and advocacy and socialization. And I think that's great, but it's not an exclusionary group where we don't allow sighted people to be members of the group. Of course, people can be sighted and be members. We want that. Because what better way to build understanding and education than to allow people to be part of something and to talk to people and have a more diverse group of people. That's how you build that sort of thing.
Yeah.
People think that just because, I'm sighted, so I couldn't be a part of that. That's wrong. We want more people of all kinds to be part of these sorts of things. So I don't know. It's but getting back kind of toward the original question, is how we debate and how we talk to each other. It's sad now. It's sad just having any interaction online. And look, I'm not saying I'm not putting myself above all of it, because I've certainly gotten into the fray with people. We all have at some point, and you feel silly about it sometimes, or sometimes maybe you don't. I don't know, but it's we all have work to do on ourselves, and I think if we're not, like I said in the previous segment, if we're not at least introspective and take a look at ourselves, how are we supposed to be able to be reasonable and rational with each other?
Yeah. This has been going on for a long, long time, and it's only been accelerated with the advent of the internet and the social media and all of that. I'm going to go out on a limb and share a story about when I was a child. And it might be controversial, but what the hell? Let's just roll with it. Because I think it paints the picture. So, and I've mentioned this on TCF. The neighborhood I grew up in was a predominantly black neighborhood. So there was not many white families around, but I was one. Our family was one of them. So I grew up around a lot of children who were not the same color as me. And we generally played together. We got along and everything was fine right up until about age 13. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was the outcast. I would encounter these kids that I grew up with. You'd see them, at the school, you'd play baseball with them, that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, and I don't know if YouTube approves of this or not, but all of a sudden I was the honky cracker out of nowhere. And
I've been called that before.
well, and it just it made no sense to me at the time, and it still doesn't today, because we all got along, but at some point, and I could be wrong, I don't know, but at some point it feels like these kids reached an age where they were told, yeah, okay, this other group is the enemy, because that's how they started interacting with me, and it just broke it. So rather than having a continued build of our relationship, a continued build of what was goodwill, it just got destroyed. Now, I'm not prejudiced against anybody. I haven't taken it personally. It hasn't affected my life from that standpoint, but I've always remembered it as kind of a what the hell moment. Why is it that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we go from being on good terms, and yeah, every group is going to have their different ways.
Yeah.
That's just facts. It's the way it is. You've got a slightly different cultures. So, the things you talk about, the things you believe in, the food you enjoy, all these things can be a little bit different. However, it doesn't have to make us enemies. But I remember that as it just like turned on a dime where I was just the devil for no reason. And I don't get it. But now we see that today, and again, not to isolate or call out that particular group, because it comes from all directions. It really does. But now we have all these different groups doing that exact same thing, but it's on the fast track now, because now we can get online, and instead of doing it in our local communities, we can do it globally.
Yeah.
And that is not healthy disagreement. That is, I don't know what that is, but it certainly isn't coming together. That's for sure.
No. So similarly, when I was a kid, I grew up here, basically, in the Phoenix area, and especially back in the 80s, this is a very white and Hispanic area, but friends I would have were of all walks of life, right? I would just have friends of whoever. And I actually found I had friends more with minorities in general, of all, again, blind people, Hispanic people, black people, whatever. And I think, looking at it in a deeper psychological mode, it's almost like, because I'm sort of a minority myself, I guess, we sort of, I didn't look at myself as a white kid. I was more, the blind kid, and that's how I was labeled. And so I was cast out by a lot of the other white kids and stuff like that. So what would happen is I'd have these friends, and one of them was a black kid, right? So then, and it happened, I don't know, I wasn't 13. It was a little younger than that. It was maybe 9 or 10. And one day, these other white kids called me like well, I won't say they just called me an N-word lover.
All right.
Because I had a black friend.
It's insane.
And I didn't even know what the word meant. Okay, I was like 9. I don't know what that word means. I didn't grow up hearing that word. I didn't know what it meant. I go home and ask my dad, and my dad goes, "What the hell?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, first of all, it's a pejorative word. But the fact that you have a friend who's of a different color, there's nothing wrong with that." And I said, "I know there's nothing wrong with that, but why do they think that's bad?" And he said, "Well, because some people are assholes, son." I mean, that's pretty much, this is, and my dad, I will say, wisdom was definitely his highest attribute on his character sheet. That was one thing he had in abundance. And sometimes it was very simple ways that he would put things, but it was that's a very matter of fact. Some people are assholes, son. And that's just, and he goes, better you learn it now. And I was like, so I felt better, because I don't know why I was, of all the, and I was bullied a lot and picked on a lot, as were a lot of kids at that time. And I just thought of all things to pick on me for, that was the weirdest one, is who my friends are. Like, oh, also I had a friend that was a girl. So then yeah, I know. And I'm like, what's wrong with that? Like, I don't know. It was weird. Like, for me, friends, I just wanted to have friends because I wanted to have people I could hang out with, and we had common interests, and we watched the same shows, or we rode bikes, or we did all the same stuff. But for some people, the tribalism, and again, it's not, kids aren't born evil, right? It's not the kids' fault. It's their parents or whoever is raising them. That's who the jackasses are.
Yeah, I agree. So we've run out of time for this topic, but I will just say this. We're proving in the spaces that you and I occupy, Michael, that it actually can be done. Black, white, boy, girl, gay, straight, doesn't matter. We're all gathering, we're all talking, we're all getting along, and we all part as friends every single day. So I guess what we've proven over the last year that you and I have kind of been in the same space and working together, Michael, is that it can be done.
Yes.
And I wish more people would just get it.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching. In the Blind is a news show for Mike and me, and we'd really love it if you could hit the subscribe button, do a thumbs up, leave a comment. All of those things really help this channel get found by other people, so we'd really appreciate the support. Thanks so much.